What did just happen to Ben Askren?
He developed some kind of crazy pneumonia, and then it became necrotic.
Thought you should know, Ben's on life support. My job out dropped.
At some point in this story, we all find out that Ben needs a lung transplant.
I had to get a double lung replacement surgery at 40, and insurance didn't want to cover it.
It's insane. It's insane.
What are you talking about? He's going to die. Like, he doesn't have lungs anymore. He was on a ventilator for months. He didn't have lungs anymore.
Insurance is a scam. When I really need them, can I count on them? A guy who represented our country?
Take this, I had to rewrite this video more than 3 times in the span of a month. But I couldn't be more relieved to do so, because Ben just funk rolled the shit out of a disease that has more than 50% mortality rate. If you follow this situation closely, you know how much of a roller coaster it has been. I'm glad to say that he was finally able to get a lung transplant.
Been home for 4 days now. It's awesome.
But not without its cost. So link in the description to donate to this family, and more on that later. And while everything was unfolding, the internet was coming up with different theories of what was happening.
I'm just sharing with you that the accurate information is largely not out there.
If you've been in the grappling space, you probably encountered staph. I know, because only after 8 months of jiu-jitsu, I had staph on and off for the last 6 months. But thankfully not as bad as the cases that I've seen. But it led me for the past 2 years down this rabbit hole on the latest staph research. Disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, this is not medical advice, this is for educational purposes only. However, my hope is to share the knowledge of what I read so that it can spread inside the community. So if you're a scientist, a doctor, or somebody that has staph, please feel free to comment the information that I've missed. But I felt like the information that should actually be out there, the information that could help the community understand better what's happening or what could happen to them, the information that could offer a glimmer of hope, was not really being discussed. A lot of information remained unclear. How did it happen? What's the link between staph and pneumonia? But most importantly, how can somebody so healthy have a staph infection that escalated so bad, so quick? So in this video, I'll try to focus on stuff that's not really being discussed. I'll give you my best educated guess on what happened from a scientific point of view. But most importantly, what this particular kind of staph can mean for our grappling community in the future of our sport. So tune in for this episode of the Staphyclopedia.
This week's topics: staph infection.
Staph infection.
Staph infection.
Staph infection led to the death of a top state worker.
In a lot of pain and suffering from something that I didn't even know I was suffering from.
30% of the human population carries Staph aureus on their skin or in their nasal cavity naturally.
Just because it's all around us doesn't mean MRSA is harmless.
I give staph, I don't get staph. Calm the down.
Methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or MRSA.
That's staph. That is fucking staph.
Been on the antibiotics and they just make me feel terrible.
Alarm signal can trigger certain bacteria to become dormant and more resilient to antimicrobials.
And then you get staph again, and then you take more antibiotics, and then it wipes out your stomach even worse, and then you get staph again. So it's like a cycle where you just keep getting staph and keep fucking up your immune system in your stomach.
Breaking down the information for you and telling you what you need to know to keep you healthy.
So first things first, to be clear, things have moved so fast since I started this video. When I was doing research, Ben was still fighting for his life in a medically induced coma, waiting for a lung transplant. However, as I was setting up to record, I saw the clip of Ben talking to the camera, sharing that his lung transplant was successful, which was amazing to hear. But seeing him 40 pounds lighter and him talking about how he died 4 times, you couldn't help but ask yourself, how did it happen? According to Mark Bitter's podcast, it all started
Friday, May 30th. Ben was in Nevada, was in Las Vegas. He went to the hospital.
And what the doctors have found was alarming. His body was riddled with staph, which quickly progressed to a pneumonia and then a sepsis.
What actually happened, I had this little spot of staph on my elbow, and it went away. It was like on my elbow, and then, a few days later it clears up, it looks all healed, but they say it somehow got into my bloodstream, which listen, I'm not a doctor, I don't know how that works, but it did. And then from the bloodstream somehow it got into the lungs.
Damn.
And then it's eating my lungs.
Now, there's one thing about staph that isn't addressed enough. Staph is not a skin bacteria. It's just a bacteria. A bacterium. Whatever the fuck. And of course, it's a bacterium that's usually noticed when it affects the skin, but it won't discriminate against any other body part. And your body usually manages well the staph that's on our skin. Our skin is used to dealing with microbes. Usually this is the reason that people are slow to act on it, because it looks like a pimple from an ingrown hair. If you let it get worse, where I've been dealing with staph infection on a recurring basis, there's more chances that staph gets inside of your body. That means the muscles, the bone, your bloodstream, and unfortunately your lungs. What happens next is a situation that I do not wish on anybody. Your body is highly sensitive to the bacteria that gets in. Your immune system gets on high alert. It recruits white blood cells towards the infection, producing a compound named cytokines, which are the main driver of inflammation of your body. Sometimes so much so that your organs can't handle it, so your body shuts down. This is what we call a septic shock or sepsis. In the case of Ben, staph probably made it to his lungs and started producing a special kind of toxin. Just to be clear, staph produces over 40 immune-evading toxins. There's a special kind of toxin that is common in staph-causing pneumonia, which makes everything way worse. It's called the Panton-Valentine leukocidin toxin. That's a mouthful, but stick with me now. It's in part what makes the staph so virulent. This toxin literally punches holes inside of your white blood cells, making them leak out, releasing cytokines. Remember the thing that causes inflammation? When those cytokines accumulate in the lungs, your cells don't like them. They start dying, necrotizes them, meaning it turns them black. You can't exchange oxygen, the thing that makes your body survive, then your body struggles, making it hard to breathe. So staph can take you a long way towards the ER. Now that you have the context, I think there's a deeper question that we can all ask ourselves. What kind of staph did Ben get?
I don't understand question, sorry.
See, because you might already have staph, but you never went to the ER for it, or never had any lung problem. And talking about it, I don't know a lot of people that has staph in the lungs.
My experience prior to this, you don't need antibiotics for every staph, right? So I showered real well, I cleaned it, I used some antibacterial.
Can we ask ourselves, are all staphs created equal? Well, you see, staph has evolved and we have something to do with it. Staph, like all living things, experience different kind of genes. Depending on the strain, there's different staph that are stronger than others. Think about it like apples or wheat. You got your sweet Honey Crisp and your sour Granny Smith. Or for my 10 Planet people out there, you got your sour Diesel and your purple Kush. That's two completely different roles. Usually in America, there's a strain that's quite deadly and highly represented in staphylococcal pneumonia, particular kind of staph that has been caught outside of hospital. A review of US outbreak of community onset MRSA found that USA 300 was responsible for the most serious epidemic. Some of you have probably heard of the term MRSA.
MRSA.
Methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. It's a fancy term to say it resists a certain strain of antibiotics, methicillin, the most commonly used. Community onset or community acquired is what scientists call MRSA that has been caught outside of the hospital. And again, that's another video for another day. But this kind of strain has two different characteristics. One, it resists antibiotics, and two, it produces a high amount of Panton-Valentine leukocidin and a whole plethora of toxins. Without confirming it, that's probably what Ben had. Necrotizing pneumonia due to MRSA, probably USA 300. An antibiotic-resistant staph that's caught in the community. What community? Well, I think it's our community. This is exactly what the community needs to hear about this particular kind of staph. Staph has always been part of grappling, in many cases not leading to complication. But why is it harder to treat? Well, antibiotic-resistant staph has been on the rise, mainly due to overuse. The pandemic has certainly increased pandemic-related MRSA. There's been a lot of studies pointing to this, because doctors gave preemptive antibiotics to patients to intube them, creating massive evolutionary pressure that creates resistance. But also inside of our community, there's been an overuse of antibiotic creams and pills.
We have the secret stash of antibiotics, and let's see what I have here.
So what should we do as athletes? Not take antibiotics? Well, no, in sticky situation, you should absolutely take care of that shit.
Got no choice.
As we've seen with Ben, things can go pretty wrong pretty fast. But we also need to think collectively of a strategy that is long-term and that can prevent the use of antibiotics to curb resistance. In my opinion, this is exactly the problem in how we're treating staph. First, don't get me wrong, modern medicine does wonders to keep people alive during an emergency. Like Ben is living with a set of lungs that are different from his. That's crazy. But generally speaking, there are not much improvement in antibiotics since the 1980s. Pharma companies are not incentivized to produce antibiotics because doctors, rightfully so, started to hold back on prescribing those for general ailments. But that means lowering profits. But if you're sitting in a board meeting, having the fiduciary responsibility of maximizing shareholders, are you unlocking budget for the one-off specific drug for the specific illness, or a lifetime medication for blood pressure or diabetes? Listen, don't even get me started on the whole medical insurance business model. Like you pay your whole life for a full coverage and then you forgot to tick the box of having a lung transplant, so you get denied. FYI, I attached the link down below to support him and his family. The donation is set up to cover the medical expenses of the transplant, because apparently transplants are not covered by your medical insurance. disgusting. But listen, this is the last time I'm being a Debbie Downer. In the spirit of Ben, I'm trying to highlight optimism.
Shit. Everything's gonna be hard today, whether it's walking to the bathroom or, going to grab food. It's gonna be hard. Now, that's instead of saying be a whiny bitch and complain about everything in your life. No one wants that shit, right?
I'm also trying to highlight hope in the latest research, stuff that the doctors may be missing.
Medicine and healthcare is moving forward, so who knows, maybe in 10 years, there'll be something where they can alleviate some of these other problems I have too.
What about natural treatment? Is there anything written in the literature? For Staphylococcal pneumonia, the strength of the study remains to be backed by human trials. Listen, in this channel, I don't back away from potential avenues as long as they're logical, replicable, and limit harm. Like the Thailand study I covered in another video. But when it comes to necrotizing pneumonia, you can understand how difficult it might be to conduct a human study. Interestingly, the latest paper that I've discovered was published on May 30th, 2025, the date that Ben was admitted to the ER. Which, if you believe in coincidence, is totally weird. It showed that ginseng mitigates necroptosis in human neutrophils, which means the death of white blood cells due to those PVL and PMS toxin from Staph 300. But again, its only theory needs an in vivo model to make strong claims. I've seen a few animal model studies on cordyceps for lung injuries. You can see the difference between the inflamed and treated lung. I presume more holes, more air exchange, the better. And the closest one to Staph was this in vitro study on the effects of cordyceps on alveolar macrophages, which is a different type of white blood cells in your lung, to reduce inflammation caused by LTA, another staph toxin. Won't hurt you. I know I'm going fast, but I don't think there's something as strong as the Thailand study for now. But listen, if you want more in-depth breakdown, please let me know. But overall, if you barely followed what I've said and you want a quick resume, one thing you can learn from all of this is that it's the inflammation from those toxins and the killing of the white blood cells that blackens the lungs. If you can handle the inflammation or the toxin production in staph, you can theoretically limit the damage to the lungs. Have I tried cordyceps or ginseng for immune boosting properties?
Yes.
Would I recommend it to somebody that's already in a ventilator? Not particularly. On the other hand,
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
So what should people do?
Do whatever the fuck you want to do.
But no, seriously, if you have an acute infection, you should absolutely go to a doctor. Take care of that shit quick. But if you have recurrent staph or live in a high staph environment, you should investigate factors that influence your infection. Because if I'm trying to sum it all up, what I'm trying to talk about is ways to tackle staph infection beyond antibiotics and precautions to take that are beyond general hygiene, which of course you should absolutely take a shower and clean the mats. You dirty fuck. But clearly the idea of keeping a gym clear doesn't solve every problem. We can all assume that Ben was clean and healthy. And again, if you've ever had recurrent staph infection, you know the feeling of getting it out of the blue when you've taken every precaution. And Chell touched on something really important in his podcast that's often said by doctors, but not really explained.
I dealt with staph my whole life, as Ben has as a wrestler. I mean, it grows in wrestling rooms, and it's one of these things that never leaves your body. It stays with you. You can cure it so there's not an outbreak, but that staph stays with you.
What do you mean by that? Like, how can staph never leave the body? If so, aren't you supposed to have pimples all the time? Aren't showers enough? Well, if you've ever wondered why you keep catching staph even though you're clean, you should probably watch the next video.